Hi, today we are going to talk about crucial conversations. My name is Warren Jansen, and for 15 and a half years, my wife and I were church planting in Japan, either on a team or leading a team of church planters. For the last 5 years there, I was the area director. For the past 12 years, and currently, I'm the international director for SEND. We have over 500 missionaries working in 21 countries, and we come from 16 different countries. So I've had plenty of opportunity to have crucial conversations with people, not only in different cultural contexts, but also coming from different cultural contexts. So the stuff I'm going to talk about today comes not just out of a book, it does come from my personal experience, our experiences over the past 30 years now with SEND. The core materials here, the core ideas are coming out of these two books by Patterson, Greene, Macmillan, and Switzler. Crucial Conversations and Crucial Accountability. I would strongly encourage you to pick these up, or at least the Conversations book up, and just go through it because it really explains in depth what we're going to be talking about today, how to understand the own issues in your own life regarding things that get you angry or put you in distress, as well as then how to have that conversation with someone so as to work through that. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at these resources. So what makes a conversation crucial? Just think of the example you have in your own life, in your own experience. When you previously had a crucial conversation, what made it crucial? Why was it full of emotions? Oftentimes it's because the stakes are high. The thing that you're talking about or the thing that you're disagreeing about is very important, or the opinions are quite diverse. And of course, the emotions are running strong. These are pretty typical markers of a crucial conversation. So what do you typically do when facing a crucial conversation? Do you avoid them? Do you face them and handle them poorly? Or are you facing them and handling them well? If you are handling them well, then you probably aren't interested much in this particular seminar. So I bet you're in the first two groups. Either you try to avoid them, try to just let the water flow under the bridge, and let's just keep moving on, or you face them, but you haven't got a good track record on outcomes for those conversations, and you'd like some more helps with that. In the book, the authors talk about people under stress, and studies have shown that when people are under stress, they typically move toward either of these two extremes, silence or violence, avoiding just denial about what is taking place, or masking it, saying that it's fine and just deflecting it and not wanting to talk about it, just masking your emotions that are all strewn out, all wound up, but yet you're just putting on the happy face and going along, or withdrawing and being quiet, going into silence, just moving away out of that situation. Or you could tend towards violence, where you're wanting to control the situation. You control that with anger or with strong words or with body language that threatens. Or you can be violent through labeling, through your words and how you are identifying people as perpetrators or as attackers or whatever. Or you yourself can attack verbally when under stress. So watching for these two extremes, when people go silent or when people get violent, you know that their stress is redlining and they are in trouble. So what is your typical response when under stress? Do you tend towards silence or do you tend towards violence? Well, I suggest that skilled people find a way to get all the relevant information out onto the open. They understand what they must do to stay in dialogue. And this seminar is going to help you to understand what you must do to be able to stay in conversation. Stay inquisitive. Keep that conversation rolling so that you can work it out, so that you can process it. There's a few key skills that you can quickly learn and apply that I think will help you to stay in conversation and be able to work through some of these issues that bring a strong emotional reaction and have put up some barriers perhaps in your team or with your coworkers or even among the people that you're trying to work and bring the gospel to. So moving to a couple of personal tips, and then I'll include some of the content from the books, but I'd first say we need to make hard decisions now of what to confront, or else you're going to be making a harder decision later. I had a leader a number of years ago who found themselves in a difficult situation, and they asked me if they should step down. My gut told me yes, but my mouth said no. I was afraid to hurt them. I was afraid to look like I wasn't backing my leaders. I wanted to inspire and to help salvage the situation. And later, when the situation got even worse, and when we actually came to the decision that that leader should step away, we asked them to do that, and then they refused. They were so dug in, they were so emotionally tied to it that they refused. And now we were in a real situation of having to needing to take some action. I had to make a bigger decision at that point and a harder decision than if I would have made that decision quite a while beforehand. So what are the confrontations that you typically avoid? Why are we hesitant? Are you afraid of hurting somebody's feeling? Are you afraid of looking bad? What are those times when we avoid confrontations? What is the cost of not confronting? Well, in this case, the situation got worse. In many cases, it demotivates the people who are performing well. The people who are really doing well get demotivated when they see a conversation that needs to happen and it just isn't happening. The decision is not being made. People are not being confronted. When that just drags on and on, the people who are working well get demotivated and lose energy. So we need to step up. We need to make those hard decisions now. Second thing I'd say is that we need to sharpen up. Be sure to simplify, clarify, and communicate well the core issues at stake. The phrase, "no one actually confronted us," or "we were not aware of the real issues or the real expectations," are classic fallback responses for people under pressure. I hear these often. We didn't know, no one actually said anything. And when we are kind, or when we keep on extending grace and then get to the place where, man, we've really got to confront this, people will say, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you get this sooner?" Because now we have a year or 2 years or 3 years of this pattern going on, and we think it's okay, and everybody else thinks it's okay. Not really. But you get into this no-win situation. It's so much better to get at the core issues early and to make sure that those are clarified. Be sure that both the issue and the process to be taken to resolve the issue are clear, both verbally and in writing. My predecessor in Japan gave me some wise counsel. He said, after you've had a conversation, go back and write up an email that just clarifies what you understood from that conversation and send it to the other party. So now you've had it verbally, and you also have it in writing. If they agree or if they disagree, then they can clarify back to you in an email or a conversation. But you're at least clarifying and making sure that you and they understand the core issues and the process that's going to be taken to resolve those issues together. Well, before we sharpen up, before we identify those core issues, we need to start with the heart. You need to understand your own motives and formulate the right motives and then stay focused. So what does that look like? The authors in the book have this graphic to capture one of their main points, and that is that we want to get to a pool of shared meaning. Each of us enters a conversation with our own opinions, feelings, theories, and experiences about the particular topic. These make up our personal pool of meaning. Now, the more information we add to each other's meanings, each other's pools, the better the decisions that are going to be made. The group's combined IQ is going to increase, and then that will facilitate better decision making and problem solving. Now, the safety is how the other person, or where the other person feels comfortable and free to talk about or listen to the topic at hand, no matter how sensitive it may be. And we'll talk a little bit about how to get to that safety in a moment. I'd like to just put in here, if you are not familiar with Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions Index, the Power Distance Index, if you're working in a cross-cultural situation or with people from another country, it might be good to do a little bit of research and find out what is the power index in their particular country. For instance, in the Philippines, they have a high power distance index, which means that they are very comfortable with an unequal distribution of power. They're comfortable with the boss making all the decisions. And so if you are the boss and you're talking to a Filipino coworker, they may be very hesitant to share their opinions. And you might have to work extra hard to draw them out, create safety so that they can be drawn out and get into that pool of shared meaning. Conversely, if you're talking with a person from Israel or Canada, the US, we have a much lower power distance index. And we expect equality. We expect to be able to share our ideas and our concepts. And so depending on your relationship with the other person, if they come from a country that has a low power distance index, it may be easier to draw them into the conversation and make sure that they are able to participate and feel safe about participating their thoughts into this pool of shared meaning. Now, we need to control the emotions that drive our actions. In our last slide, I was talking about starting with your own heart and understanding your own motives. And one of the ways of getting to that is looking at this process. See and hear there's an event, then you feel a strong emotion, you take action. Let me give an example of that. Say I'm supposed to speak at a school event or a banquet or go and teach someplace, and I'm walking out of the bedroom on my way to go to this event, and my wife looks at me and tilts her head and goes like, seriously? Now, there's the event. I've encountered my wife. She's looked at my choice of clothing for that day and gave me the head tilt and the seriously. And I get a strong reaction to that. I have emotional flood in my body, and I'm ready to act on that. Either I'm going to avoid it and just head for the door and out to my appointment, or I'm going to confront her and say, well, what do you mean? What is with that? Or what's wrong with what I'm wearing? I'll act on my emotion. Now, what's super important, vitally important to understand is that between the event, encountering my wife, and getting this strong rush of emotions, I told myself a story. I had to make sense of these surroundings, of the circumstances, and so I told myself a story. And that story happened in less than a second and could have been things like, I'm good at selecting matching clothes together, or why is she criticizing me? She always criticizes me, or whatever, a whole number of possibilities. But I've told myself a story, and I believe, as Paul even writes to the Corinthians, those are the places, that's the story that we need to capture, the thoughts that we need to capture and submit to Christ. If you want to understand your motives and formulate the right motives so as to enter a conversation, especially a crucial conversation, in a godly manner, you need to ask yourself, what's the story I've been telling myself to make sense of this situation? Because oftentimes I am attributing motive to the other person. that may or may not be true. You're filling in the gaps of what you don't understand with an explanation so that you can get an emotional reaction. And your answers for those gaps may not be accurate. This is critical to capture the story that you're telling yourself between the event that happens and your emotional reaction to it. What's the story I'm telling myself? That will help you to prepare your heart, understand your motives, and get into a place, a more neutral place where you can deal with the facts at hand. Now we're going to talk more specifically about how to do that, but this is just a critical thing to consider. Another thing I'd say at this point is unbundling the problem or diagnosing the problem. The authors offer a little thing, they call it CPR. Is this a content or process issue? Is this a pattern issue? So is this a one-time thing? Is this just a content thing that happened one time and you're ticked at it and I can let that go? Or is this a pattern issue? This is consistent behavior and you're concerned about it. You know, people say the first time is an incident, the second time is a coincidence, and the third time is a pattern. And if it's a pattern that is destructive or is undermining to your ministry or the team or relationships, that pattern needs to be addressed. So content, what is it, a content or process issue? Is it a pattern issue, or is it a relational issue? Is this about trust and respect? So just trying to unbundle the problem and trying to get at it. Is it just about the content or the thing that they did? Is it actually about that they repeatedly do it? Or is it really about an issue of trust, an issue of respect or integrity, a relational issue? Now, instead of assuming the worst and then acting in ways that confirm your assumptions, you want to stop and ask, why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person act in this way? Now, posing this question helps you to open yourself up to other possibilities. So in these ways, we are mastering our stories. We're preparing our hearts to get our motives into the right place. And now we're prepared to talk. So how do you deliver then on processing a conversation where the stakes are high and you're not sure about the outcomes? How do we get into perspective and then deliver on a conversation that is crucial? You begin by starting with safety. Here you want to review your common purpose. You want to remember why you're in that ministry, in that place. Questions like, so why? Can you just remind me again what motivated you to come and join this ministry or to come to this place, this country, and learn this language and be involved in this ministry here? Why is it? What's motivating you? Just to remember the core essence of who we are in God and why we're there according to His purposes and joining in His work. Getting that common ground back again, that safe place that, we're both about the same thing here. We're trying to accomplish a particular ministry in the name of Jesus for these people, whatever it is. But just reviewing that common purpose, getting to that place of safety. This may be a place that you have to retreat to in the middle of your conversation later on if they are avoiding, if they're going silent or they're going violent. You need to kind of retreat back and just remind them and get back to this place of safety that, we're here for a common purpose. So starting with safety. Then describing the gap. Here's what you expected. Here's what you've been experiencing. And this is the gap. Now, it's critical not to diagnose or describe what you think is the reason for the gap. You're not trying to fill in the gap. You're just communicating the path, the experience that brought you to this gap. I had a person I was working with where I had given them some assignments and I had these expectations. And when those assignments came back to me or were turned in, they were quite a bit lower than my expectations, quite a bit different than my expectations. So I had to have a conversation with this person because I let it go one time, then it came the second time, same kind of thing. Third time, there's this pattern going on, and I knew that I had to address this performance gap with this individual, and just sat down and said, here's what I was expecting, and here is what I experienced, and here's the gap. And just describing that gap after getting to a place of safety or starting with safety, then describing that gap with that person. And then instead of now trying to figure out why there is that gap, or in terms of me then trying to propose reasons for that gap, you end with a question. Start with safety. Describe this journey that you've had that has brought you to this place of feeling dissonance or a gap with what you expected and what you're experiencing. And now you end with a question to say, hey, help me understand this gap. Help me fill this in. I don't want to presume. I don't want to guess. I'd like you to help me to fill this gap. And in this particular situation with one of my coworkers, they saw the gap and they didn't have real good, they offered up some explanations, but they even knew that they were lame. They were just not, there's things going on where they were not putting in the effort and not really finishing things all the way to the end line and stuff. And they recognized, wow, okay, I have been underperforming. And that then gave a beautiful opportunity to say, well, okay, let's try this again, and you need to understand the expectations and then accomplish them, or else we might have to look for a different position in the organization for you. That was probably the safest way to approach that performance evaluation, if you will, with this individual. So starting with safety, describing the gap, and then ending with a question. This ending with a question helps you to open up the others to explore their paths, and then go just hear them out, and perhaps they have some things that you didn't know are going on that are affecting how they're relating to you or how they're performing their job or whatever. There may be information out there that you had no idea about, and if you just hear it, okay, now that fills in the gap, and now I can understand, and so now I will extend more grace, or I will come alongside and support you, or I will take those assignments away and do something else here. It gives you some ground, some facts upon which to develop a solution together with that other person. And then after, you move to action. So what are we going to do? And being specific with that. If you keep leaving it nebulous, especially if you're dealing with an issue of a pattern or dealing with an issue of character, if you leave the follow-up nebulous, you're just asking for more issues and more confrontations later on. So when you move to actions, you want to be specific about who and what and by when, and then to follow up with that. So that's the concept. Let me now continue on with just some of my personal reflections or observations in terms of what we can do, and then follow or end off with a bit of your own case study. So another suggestion I have is buddy up. When you're entering into a crucial conversation, make sure that you have another leader, not your spouse, there to also hear the conversation. If you do not, and it turns out bad, you are locked into a he said, she said situation where you can't win, you can't validate, or you can't, clarify. It's just your opinion or your word against their word if they choose to be hostile or choose to not agree and work with you. So it's when you're entering into a crucial conversation, it's great to have two people in that, and that I've had a crucial conversation where I needed to confront a couple, and we together decided we're going to have a third person in that conversation, and it's not going to be one of my co-leaders or even a person on our staff. This person's going to be outside of our organization, and they're going to be, I let the other couple choose who that person would be, and they just came and sat in to hear what was going on, and to later be able to say, well, actually, this is how it went down. This is what was said, and that person actually helped me later to reflect on the conversation that we had, and learn what I did well and what I didn't do well and what I can improve on. So whether it is your coworker or a friend, or whether it is a third-party observer, it's just when you're entering into a crucial conversation, it is good to have buddy up and to have another person there. Pull up. When in a crucial conversation, be sure to come back to the real reason you're having this conversation. A common purpose that is owned by all parties. That is especially critical if you see them moving to silence or moving to violence, whether they're avoiding and just deflecting, masking, or whether they're turning violent and attacking or labeling and name calling and that kind of thing. If they move that way, then just kind of step back. Don't engage. Don't go there. Step back and let's remember why we're here and why this is important and why we want to keep going here with open hands, as in a neutral, trying to get to a neutral place there. Let's go back to this common purpose and try to get to safety. Follow up. After a crucial conversation, write down what you understand were the key points from the conversation and what were the outcomes or action steps, and then have the other person or people clarify that this understanding is accurate. That will help you later on when you need to come back and check up on them and or check up on how the thing's going, to have that common understanding of what took place and what are the follow-up actions. That's really important. Tighten up. When giving an evaluation or decision, provide information on the process taken and not too many details of the evidence. We had a situation in a large team, or multiple teams with one leader, and had personnel conflict, very deep personnel conflict in that group. We got together a task force, another group of other people around that situation to take a look at it and look at the details, interview the people, just really go deep into this thing. And because we wanted to save it, we wanted to resolve it, we wanted to be united and keep on being able to minister together. So we got all this information, got all this detail, heard the stories, went through it, came to a conclusion that we believed that the Lord was taking us to, and went back, and one of the people in this group then went back to each member of these two families, these two couples that were having such a deep relational conflict, and started delivering the results of our investigation, if you will. And one of the key mistakes that was made at that point was we shared specifics. Well, you had this conversation at this point in this place, and these are the things that were said, and the person, then that gave those individuals the ability to say, that's not how it went down, or well, you don't get that, you weren't there. And if you go into the details, you provide them an opportunity to refute all of those details. Sometimes it is not the single detail. Oftentimes, I would say, it's not just a single detail, a single event, a single conversation that is the key thing. It is a pattern over time. It is a series of events over time that will lead you to a fairly significant decision about the future of those people on your team or in your ministry or whatever. So more important than the details is to explain the process that was taken and then the result of that process. If you can show integrity in the process, I think you have a pretty good case for saying, well, this is the decision that we made. And if they want to dig into the details, you're not going to win on the details. Unless there's one singular significant event that is easily a no-brainer of taking action on. But then you probably wouldn't be having this deep and extended confrontations. So typically in these things where it's just happening over time and you get this deep relational rift, you need to have a good process, a process full of integrity, and then just camp on your final conclusions once you get there through the process. And the people have to accept that the process was sound, and these are your conclusions. And okay, well, that's your conclusions. We have to live with that. If you go to the details, you just get stuck in the mud. Then to listen up. Patrick Buchanan, I should have put his name in here. Patrick Buchanan, The Rest of God. He does a study on Sabbath rest, and one of the things he mentions there is that our speaking comes out of our listening, and our listening comes out of our silence, and our silence comes out of our rest. We ourselves need to be resting in our Lord, enjoying moments of silence and meditation with Him, and making space for the Holy Spirit to work in our lives. That's uncluttered space. And out of that deep connection with our Lord, we can listen well, and we can then speak out of that. If we are so busy speaking and so busy doing, we're going to be running on fumes. We're going to be running on our own fumes and not on the Spirit's power in these things. So it's just critical to listen well and give the Holy Spirit room to speak and to communicate with you and with your team if there's a group of you doing a crucial conversation like this. And then lighten up. Finally, remember to have joy in the journey. Discover ways to have moments of fun with your team, so that it's not always intense and not always, that it's not just intensity and then crucial conversations, but we have a lot of fun together. So those are just a couple of observations from my experiences over the past many years. Now, I want to give you one more story, one more case study, and then I'm going to invite you to think of your own case study and work through your own case study. I'd just like to tell you the story of Kim. Here, this person was in our life group, our small group, and she had a trusted friend who was walking a similar journey with her daughter as that Kim was walking with her daughter. And so this friend invited Kim to be part of a women's group. And Kim was going to a new church, and this lady was a marriage ministry leader in that church. And in the email it said, "Let's get together. I have some ideas on what we can do." And so Kim went, and her expectation was, I've been invited to dinner to this lady's home. It's going to be her and I. She's got some ideas that we can talk about. It's going to be cool. And that's what it's going to be. So when she arrived, there were 12 women there. They already had supper, and no one greeted her. They just invited her to sit in a circle, and she only recognized 2 out of the 12 women. Very quickly, the leader pointed at a woman and said, "Okay, you start." And this woman began to share intimate details of spousal adultery, of the situation, and how they were coping with it. And these women, they just went around the circle, and these women were sharing deep and personal, private things about their marriages. And so when it came to Kim, she felt obligated to share something personal about her relationship with her husband. And just it felt a very toxic environment, and she was just didn't know what was going on here. When they were finished sharing, the leader read some prepared statements about a number of the women, praising or challenging them as they journeyed through this particular valley. Kim didn't want to know that stuff about those other women, and now she was burdened with it. She didn't know the purpose of the group, where it was going, what was the understanding of confidentiality. She didn't know anything. She just stepped into this kind of landmine. She tried to talk with the leader about it later and just kind of got shut down or pushed aside. And so she was really struggling with what was happening here, and came to my wife and I and just said, how do I talk to this woman about this? I have such high emotions. She was so angry and so disappointed, and she was filling in all the gaps and attributing motive and just really having a difficult time with this other person. So we started to talk to her and we said, what do you really want? If everything were to turn out great, what would that look like? And then we ask, well, what's the real issue? Was it something that she said? Was it how she set up the meeting? Or was it how it impacted you? If it's all three, think specifically about what the issues are in all three categories. And instead of assuming the worst and then acting in ways that confirm your assumptions, stop and ask, why would a reasonable person not do what she suggested in her email? Did I miss something important at the supper table conversation? Be careful not to begin by seeing that person as a villain. She eventually prepared a conversation. She prepared a script for talking with this woman and was able to sit down with her and fill in a bunch of the gaps and come to an understanding that this woman's approach to family and marriage issues was not something that resonated with Kim, and Kim didn't want to be a part of that and was able to step away with that and still kind of maintain a little bit of a relationship with this lady. But it could have turned out much different. She could have just gone in and really accused this person and said a bunch of things that she might have regretted later. But this helped her to have that crucial conversation. So you can probably think of at least one crucial conversation that you should have. And so I'd invite you to stop now and just think about one situation where you've either had a crucial conversation and you'd like to diagnose it, or you need to have a conversation and you want to prepare for it. Work through the process outlined here and sketch out the conversation that you would have, at least from your side. Their responses will determine where you actually go with the conversation and what kind of solution that you land on. Now, just as a reminder, you want to start with safety. Think about questions or comments that will remind each you all about the common purpose, the reason why you're even there, the reason why this is worth having this conversation. And then describe the gap. Describe your journey to this place, what you expected, what you experienced, and what the gap is. Remember not to try to describe why you think there's a gap, but simply your journey, your path that brought you to this place. And then end with a question. End with a question that says, just help me understand, this gap, or help me understand why these things aren't connecting, or help me to understand why this is not taking place. End with a question. Based on their response in your interaction later, then you can go to action and how you want to follow that all up. But start with safety, describe the gap, and end with a question. Structure your conversation, what you wish you would have said in a previous event, or what you want to say in an upcoming crucial conversation. Take some time to just do that now, and then we can finish up after that. Just as a final thing, I'd encourage you actually to practice your conversation with another person. Let them, get into a group of two and give your part of the conversation and have the other person critique it. Was there safety? Was the gap clearly explained? Was there a good question at the end? And just practice that, even practice in the mirror before going to that person, because if the less you stumble, or the more you have your concepts and your thoughts and even your tone and the words constructed, the better and the smoother that the conversation is going to go. After doing that, I'd say, which one of these principles are most challenging for you? Avoiding the conversations altogether, going violent in a conversation, trying to pull up when somebody starts to get nasty in a conversation, and pulling back and going to a place of safety. Is that really hard for you? Or is describing the gap hard for you? Which of these are most challenging for you? And choose one and think, what 2 or 3 actions can you take this week to grow in the area or to minimize its impact on you and your team? When are you going to do this, and who's going to remind you of this or ask you about it? In order to really take advantage of the material presented here and to better prepare you and develop this skill of having crucial conversations, I really encourage you to take concrete steps and decide, when are you going to do this? What are you going to do to grow in this area? When are you going to do it? And who's going to follow up with you about it? I pray that you would have great success in having conversations that pull people together, that resolve issues, that can propel the gospel forward in whatever kind of ministry that you're doing for the sake of our Lord and for his kingdom. And thanks for listening, and Gary will help you with questions or follow-up.